Hi everyone, and welcome to another video about video games with me, Rob, and today we're talking about Fell Seal Arbiter's Mark, which is available on Steam and PS4 and Xbox One and Switch, and it's developed by Six Eye Studio and published by 1C Entertainment. This is one of your turn-based tactical RPGs in the style of, say, Final Fantasy Tactics and games like that. Some people are saying that it's the spiritual successor of Final Fantasy Tactics, which I can understand the angle that you're coming from when you say stuff like that, but I don't think it's fair to compare an indie game to a game that's developed by a AAA publisher / developer. So we're just going to put Final Fantasy Tactics and other games of that ilk over to one side and focus on Fell Seal, which I think is only fair. And what you have when you just focus on Fell Seal is a game that's actually kind of surprising in that it is a very, very good game, a very solid fantasy RPG. One of the things I'd want to focus on with this game is that it is a very, very old school style game. You have your traditional long introduction about some of the history of the game, which gives you a certain amount of exposition about the kind of characters or the kind of character that you're going to be playing. And you take on the role of Kiri, who is an Arbiter. Now, the Arbiters work for the Immortals. The Immortals were basically the beings who stood against this great darkness and became immortal, and they have a council, and they can basically be on the council for a while and then retire, and then someone else becomes the Immortal. I'm not sure about the mechanics of that, but apparently it involves some kind of mark that is placed on their body, and then they undergo a kind of pilgrimage type thing / test. And what you have in this world, the Arbiters have been around for a while, but as with anything that has power, corruption does tend to set in. In most of these games, the nobles tend to be corrupt, and really, for once, I'd like it if you had some good, pure, noble hero, maybe the third son of a noble house who becomes the hero or something like that, and then can kind of look at it and say, okay, yeah, nobles, not all of them are bad. Just a personal gripe with the whole fantasy genre in general, rather than this video game in specific. Anyway, back to Fell Seal. When it comes to combat, the mechanics are exactly what you'd expect from a tactical RPG. You can attack and then move, or move and then attack, and everything is based on the squares that you can move to. You do more damage from behind than you do from the front. Yada, yada, yada. Everything works. And if you've played any kind of tactical RPG, you can dive straight in. One of the fun bits that happens in this is when you go to the guild and you can hire more characters to join your party, and that's where the character creator comes in. It's a pretty basic character creator, but it does the job for this type of game. Now, here's where it gets interesting. See, these games, tactical RPGs, they generally live or die based on the strength of their story, and Fell Seal has actually a pretty good story. It is a bit slow to get going. It does drag a little in places right at the beginning, but once you give it a chance, you really get absorbed in it, and it becomes much more interesting as certain threads of the plot become more and more apparent. And that's where this game becomes kind of addictive. I'll be honest, it is just a little bit addictive, because you want to know what happens next in the story, but in order for you to get to that point in the story, you have to beat certain areas, which you can only beat if you're strong enough, which means you have to grind a little, which means going around fighting other battles. There are those sorts of issues to deal with, but that's kind of part and parcel for any RPG. That's a testament to the strength of the story in Fell Seal, though, and it's a testament to Six Eye Studio, who have come up with what is actually quite an interesting, fascinating story. I have to admit, I did get certain vibes of an anime series called Roca, Braves of the Six Flowers from the story in Fell Seal. There were certain elements that kind of resonated with that particular anime series, and I can kind of understand why that's the case. But Fell Seal, Arbiter's Mark, in essence, is a very, very pure turn-based tactical RPG with a good, solid fantasy story that you're not really going to get bored of anytime soon. Okay, there are dull parts. That's part and parcel for this type of game. There are going to be parts of the game where it becomes a bit of a drag. Really, when it gets to those parts, just basically put it down, go do something else, come back to it. Okay? Best way to play this game. Don't try and marathon it. Take your time with it. That said, the combat is actually quite interesting in that it takes a different approach to items in combat. You have limited usage on items in combat, which means that you can't spam certain overpowered items when you're fighting against your enemies. And that I actually really like because it adds a certain tension to battles. Yes, you have this get out of jail free card, but you could only use it a certain number of times, and how many times are you going to need it in the battle? You don't know. Other things about the combat that I really like are the fact that environmental factors can come into play. You can have trapdoors that are hiding enemies, you can have treasure chests, you can have various items that can only be picked up in the middle of combat. And that adds a different element to the actual combat because it means that you might be trying to hold off your enemy while you're trying to open a treasure chest that's in a different part of the actual combat area. And while you're doing that, your character who is going to open the treasure chest might be being chased by several other enemies who you are then chasing. It adds a different element to the tactical nature of the combat. Now, when you go to the guild, you can create a variety of characters, and each of the characters that you create can be added to your combat team. You can have up to 6 players in the combat. You'll basically have certain limitations in certain areas, depending on the number of enemies or depending on the nature of that area. But in general, you'll work out a playstyle that suits you. And that's one of the things about this game. Aside from the story, it's a game where the way you fight, the way you approach combat, the tactical element of the game, that's all on you. And that's one of the appeals of the tactical RPG genre. So anyway, Fell Seal, Arbiter's Mark. I think it's solid as an RPG. I think it's got a great storyline that is really interesting. And I think that if you're a fan of tactical RPGs, like Final Fantasy Tactics, I'm going to mention it here, but it's not the only tactical RPG that's available on the market. There are others like Tactics Ogre and Vandal Hearts and the Banner Saga. Disgaea is a very well-known one. Valkyria Chronicles, hell, that's a tactical RPG. So there are other tactical RPGs that kind of fit into this mold to a greater or lesser degree. This is a solid one, and I think if you like any of those other games, then you'll probably find something appealing in... then you'll probably find something appealing in Fell Seal. But anyway, leaving that to one side, what did you all think of the game? I am always interested in what everyone thinks about the games that we cover on this channel. So leave us your comments below. Let us know what you think. Did you love it? Did you hate it? And if you want to see more videos like this one, then hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and I'll see you all next time.